Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sexy Business Podcast. I'm Lewd Neko, and joining me is Spooky Dangerous.
I am that crusty sock at the bottom of your hamper.
And today we are going to be talking about the very recent dating sim that just came out, Date Everything. Some of you have probably heard of this one. It got a lot of hype when it was first announced. It's had some trailers out, it had a demo out. But for those of you who have been living under a rock, Date Everything is essentially a game that is exactly what it says on the title. It is sort of a sandboxy dating sim where instead of dating a couple of different characters and having a bunch of really intense romantic relationships, you have 100+ objects in your house that you can interact with to see humanized versions of them. And you can get sort of short little routes where you get to fall in love with them, make friends with them, or hate them.
Yeah, maybe we should try a hate everything run. But
The genocide route.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, Neko, you played it on stream for a bit. I got to watch you playing it on stream for a bit. It's going to be interesting to kind of run through and talk about some of the different characters, how some of it's presented, and kind of what's going on. But I think that the main thing is the game's presented in a very comedic way. Like, it's not quite a satire, but it's like very much a parody of the kind of romance games genre in general. A lot of the characters are intentionally very goofy, and a lot of that is communicated in the character design. A thing that I think we should spend some time talking about, because the character design is very good, because it has to answer the question of, if this blank found in your home was a person, what would they look like? And I think it does a pretty good job of that. But, let's kick it off. What was your experience like playing the game?
So I played a little bit of the demo before it came out, and then I've played about 6 hours or so of the actual game. So I haven't seen all of it. There's certainly still like so many hundreds of, not hundreds, but dozens of more characters for me to unlock. And in my playthrough, I focused more on trying to sample a bunch of characters. I didn't complete a ton of routes quite yet. So I'm still very much in the early stages of playing the game, but it is very much exactly what I expected from this. When I heard about the launch of this game, I was basically looking for three things. I was like, one, I would like to see some cool character designs in this game. I've always been a big fan of humanizations, or jijinkas, as we used to call them back in the Pokemon fandom in like 2010. I always loved seeing humanized Pokemon. I remember being on Tumblr when people did the humanized websites thing, where Tumblr and 4chan got shipped together as a hate ship. Like shit like that was super fucking popular. So I'm not surprised that now in the 2020s you have a bunch of artists and creatives who have gotten together to do something silly like that, of what if every object in your house was a person, and what would they look like, and what would they talk like, and what would their personality be like. It's sort of one of those like fun things that you think about, and when you're trying to go to sleep. And we've had all sorts of humanizations. It's a really common thing in fan art that you see all the time on both like Western fan art, Japanese fan art. It's just like, what if we made this thing a human? And that's definitely where this game shines, is in its art. I mean, there's so much freaking art in this game. There's over 100 characters. They all have multiple sprites and expressions. Some of them have little images that they get. And then the other big draw is the sheer amount of voice actors. There are unique voice actors for all of these characters, and definitely at least quite a few you'll recognize from anime, from games, from across the web, from social media. They have some pretty big names here, as well as some newcomers, and all of them so far have done a really nice job at making each character feel very unique and feel very lived in. And it also makes this a very pleasant experience. This is the kind of game that you can chill out with while you're like eating lunch or dinner, or just enjoying a snack, and you can kind of watch it almost like it's a TV show, because of the fact that it is pretty much fully voice acted, even including the narrations. And then personally, the last thing I was really looking for from this game was like, this should be a game that makes me laugh. And I have laughed at it quite a few times so far. Now, this is definitely a very particular brand of humor, where I think you can kind of tell by like watching the trailer whether or not you're going to think this game is funny. This game is definitely, it's full of puns, as one might expect. Each character name is a pun. They make all sorts of puns. It has some sort of like very stupid dad jokes that I enjoy laughing at, as well as some more clever jokes about the characters and their personalities. So if that's up your alley, you'll enjoy this. If you find that grating, probably not so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good place to start when talking about it, right? Because pretty much every single character, their name is a word play on the thing that they were. Um, for example, Keith is a key. The is it the air conditioner, the HVAC, but he lists out the full actual, like, as if HVAC was his initials, is like Hector or something. Um, what other crazy ones
Dorian,
were
the
there?
door.
Yeah, and so it's really trying to present as silly on the surface, and so it does have a really silly kind of humor even before you get to the part where you get the date V8s and you actually start interacting with the objects. The intro is you're getting this job at, it's not Vivaldi or something like that, Voldarian evil company whose name starts with V, and
Yeah, totally not Amazon.
totally not Amazon. And you in like some kind of chat service, and there's just a lot of silly character moments where they're just saying funny things, but it has nothing to do with the game that you're going to be playing. It's just like kind of setting the tone. And so a lot of it kind of is like that, where it's like any opportunity that we could have, we're going to try and tell you a joke. And which kind of means that some of them aren't going to hit, but it also means that if it has a good hit rate, then it is going to be funny for you, right? Like they're just kind of throwing out shots all of the time, kind of hoping for outcomes, which I think is fine. Like the whole point is that it's intended to be a funny, silly game. It's not a serious romance experience. It's very much a parody of the romance genre, and I think done in an interesting way. In like the taking away from this context for a second, you're watching your favorite TV show or you're playing your favorite dating sim, and you're being interacting with the characters kind of one by one. They're being introduced, and you go, "Cool, this character's definitely my favorite. She's got the biggest rack, but then also this other character shows up, and she's really bitchy, and I don't like her." That kind of happens where it's like you're gonna see a character, you go, "Yes, this is the toilet. Just how fucking interested in the toilet could I be?" And then I think that is a way that it is kind of played for humor as well. Like there just is going to be not dud characters, because like they have a reason to exist there. It's not everything if they don't include everything, but characters that you're just going to not have any interest in, or it's going to be cringe, and you're going to try and focus on specific ones that you do like, which is kind of hard. So it is going to have some kind of meet everything kind of strategy to start it out.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's the other advantage of them having the love, friendship, or hate status. So you don't necessarily have to fall in love with all of these characters. There's even some characters who prefer friendship, and they will specifically ask for friendship, and it's a lot harder for you to get onto their love route. But also, if you don't like a character, you can be absolutely rude as fuck to them, and presumably you will get a hate route if you do things that upset them. Like, for example, there's a cat clock character who is all about timeliness. So he will tell you to come and talk to him at certain times of the day. And if you do talk to him at that time of the day, you're going to get onto that like love or friendship path. But if you intentionally come on the wrong time of day, then you start to go onto his hate path. And that's also something that adds to a little bit of replayability. As we alluded to earlier, you could totally do a love route of this game where you're going to play through it and you're going to try to get the love status or the friend status with all of these characters. And then you could also just like go full villain mode and go, you know what, actually, I'm not going to date everything. I'm going to hate everything. And you can be as mean to your, couch as you like.
All right, let's talk some character design. Now, did you have any breakout favorites from playing the game?
So one of my favorites actually ended up being the bed named Betty. She is this really cute, and I say this with lovingly, plush character who has a very warm voice. She has these really cute freckles, and she has this like mattressy sort of design with these cute little sandals, and I really liked her. She looked exactly what I would want my bed to look like. She looks like someone who I could fall asleep in her lap. Though really there was like a ton of character designs that were super interesting. I liked the bathtub as well, Bathsheba. She's got this sort of regal, like princessy look going on. She's got like this phone headdress thing. I don't know even how to describe it, other than say, look at the art for this game. It's really interesting. Though one thing I will say that I just noticed so far is there's a lot of characters with tattoos. Almost like half of the characters I encountered had tattoos on them, which I'm not against tattoos by any means. I just thought it was interesting from a character design standpoint that a lot of these characters just had sort of like clever tattoos on their bodies, which sometimes worked. Like, for example, there's like a literary character who is, he like represents all of your books, and he has a bunch of like tattoos and like written stuff on him. And that makes sense. I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes sense for a book to be covered in tattoos that are like quotes and pictures of books and things like that. But other times it felt a little like gimmicky or forced, of like, I don't know how to further emphasize that this character is this object, so I'm going to give them a tattoo that is that object. So like that was like one of my only critiques, is that it was just a bit of a thing I noticed that this character designer was doing. Though I will say it is still impressive. I did look through the credits because I was curious, and this was all done by one character designer. I think they had multiple people working on the actual art, but all of these were designed by one person. And part of me almost wonders, in an ideal universe, I think maybe having a team of people working on the character designs could have potentially been more interesting, because there is a point where you start to notice, like I said, like some of those quirks that this particular designer has, of like including the tattoos, or like they like to do a lot of interesting things with like jewelry, for example, or some of the designs can look a little bit samey. And I think that maybe if they had had more people working on these, especially since 100 is just a lot of characters to design and make unique, then maybe we could have gotten a little bit more variety, though they're still like all very fun to look at.
Yeah, it is definitely a scope project kind of problem because it's very big for something that doesn't need to be very big. Like, it's offering you a sampler platter of lots of different things. Like, it's what is it, like the 1 inch deep ocean kind of problem, where it's just
Yeah,
really
so
really
it's as wide
wide
as
but
an
not very deep.
ocean, deep as
Yeah.
a puddle.
Yeah, and I think that's what they were trying to do. They want to give everyone this tiny slice of experience with lots of different characters so that they can deliver more different varied jokes or whatever. And when you know that you have 100 characters, it is difficult to really make all of their voices unique. And I don't mean specifically verbally, I mean like written and stuff like that, and how you're going to communicate this person's personality, because according to the Zodiac, there's only like 12 unique people anyway, and so 100 of them is like really hard to do. Like, I've done games before where we had 8 main characters, and it's like they start to have a lot of overlap, and it's like, yes, you can kind of argue that there's a reason for some of them to talk similarly because they spend a lot of time together. They would be friends, you pick up social tics and stuff like that, but that's still an excuse for why one person wrote all these different people to be too much the same. And it can kind of have that same issue here, where that I wonder if the joke will just kind of run flat eventually. Like, yeah, this is my toaster, yeah, this is my TV, yeah, this is the bathtub, or whatever. Where it's like, unless if the character revealed to you is really exciting most of the time, it's going to feel like you're getting diminishing returns every single time you go, okay, it's not, well, okay, this one, okay, like, surely there's a route where you just miss constantly, like, you just pick the shit options, you don't find any characters that interest you, and then you're like, where's my waifus at? Like, I really feel like because you don't know what any of the characters are until you meet them for the first time, either you have to be really interested to go and explore, or you play the game with a guide. And you go, yes, these are the characters that I know I will like, or these are the characters with my favorite voice actors, or, these are the characters with these types of personalities that I like, and then that's who I'm going to go and try and find. Because it's, like I said, a really wide game, that it means that you're going to be encountering a lot of stuff that you might not care about. Or you also don't know what the gender of the object is before you open it up and say hello. So if you're an incredibly hetero male that has got no interest in men whatsoever, every single time you meet a guy, you're like, this could have been a waifu, and yet I have been let down, right? So I feel like this might just have to be a game that you play with a guide.
Yeah, and I will say the reception to this hasn't been 100% positive. It has gotten like really good reviews so far on Steam, and like the general reception, I would say, has been really good. I think it's probably sold really well based on just the hype around it. But there was a particular critical article on PC Gamer that says, Date Everything claims to be a dating sim, but it doesn't love or understand its own genre. And I can partially agree with what this author is saying. They are right to an extent. This is not a game that is like professing how wonderful the dating sim genre is. This is not something that you should be looking for if you're looking for an actual romance game. If you're like, I want to get invested in this character, I want to develop a relationship with them, and I want to cry and have all these emotions, you're just not going to get that. It is extremely shallow. Most of the characters really only have like a handful of interactions before their route finishes up, and then that's it. You move on to the next character. So this is not going to be, a Tokimeki Memorial where it has this really complicated scheduling system and point systems and things like that. It's very much meant for more of that casual audience who normally doesn't play visual novels. And I think it's important to acknowledge that that's an audience that exists. I'm definitely someone who is not like a casual when it comes to visual novels. I love playing the really long ones. I've read some like that took, 60 plus hours or whatever. And the average person, or much less the average gamer, is not going to do that. And I think that's something the visual novel community has to acknowledge is that reading is kind of on the decline. And that makes me sad as a person, but it's kind of true. And as a result, a lot of people are not really motivated to stick around for a 60-hour romance story, especially with some of the like tropes or pitfalls of some of the more anime ones that might not sit well with Western people. Like we've talked about the whole high schooler issues, that's viewed very differently in the West as opposed to in Japan. And so a game like this is very much pandering itself more towards people who think dating sims are like kind of cute or silly and they'd like to engage with them, but they're not willing to invest a ton into them. But they do think it would be fun to look at a bunch of like kind of sexy characters and have fun with their voice actors and things like that. So that's kind of just my warning where if you are expecting something that is particularly deep or profound, you're not going to get that here. One thing I will say that is interesting, and I don't really have an opinion on it because I didn't encounter much of it in my playthrough so far, is Date Everything does include content warnings for certain characters. So there are a handful of characters that do apparently deal with some darker themes, such as PTSD, violence, stalking, manipulation, mental health issues, addictions, and so on. And if you basically turn on content warnings, I had it turned off, but what I believe happens is Skylar will interrupt. She will give you a description of here's the content warnings for this character and what is going to happen. And then you basically have the option of either skipping that route and still getting the benefits or actually engaging with it. And then, of course, if you turn them off, you don't get that warning. So this is something that I am not sure how to feel about because this is very clearly a comedy game. That's what it's sort of designing itself as. And so depending on how these themes are being portrayed, I could see this being a major drawback because it can be kind of weird for the game where you fuck your couch to be like, let's have a serious talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a little bit of too much tonal whiplash, but I'm not exactly sure how that's actually being dealt with. So I can't form a solid opinion. That being said, like I said, it is skippable. So if you are someone where you're worried you might have a reaction to a content like that, there is that option to sort of skim over it. But just something to maybe be aware of if you are going to engage with it.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of actual adult games should do more of this. I feel like people are going to feel more confronted by different kinks that they're not interested in than actually real world topics. I mean, obviously it's different things, but like again, it's the same problem where it's like I came here looking for this, and something that I was not expecting came and ruined the vibe. And like in a more hornier game, it's like, oh, this kink showed up that I wasn't interested in, and now my boner is ruined and my day has been destroyed. In this, it's like I came here for a funny haha time, and instead I'm sobbing on the couch, and that's equally not great. Like, because the game does such a specific job of communicating a vibe. It's light, it's fluffy, everything's silly. I don't see what value adding more adult themes, more darker themes is going to present when you're not having these really long arcs with these characters. You're not growing old with them. You're not, learning all of their secrets and holding their hands and getting married and stuff. So it seems like a strange choice. It seems like they were just like, what if we did this with this character? Because either the type of person that would be interested in them would appreciate this kind of vibe. Like, I can understand a really punk or goth character, being more open and talking about some of the harsh things that they've had to go through or whatever like that. But I don't think it is necessary. Like, I don't think it contributes to the larger thing. And if it is, then becomes part of a joke. Like, here's some context to a story, and then now here's the punchline afterwards, that because you've learned this about me as a character, you now find this funny. It also feels like it's potentially in bad taste too. But again, without actually specifically experiencing them firsthand, it's hard to say how good or bad it is. It is just feels like it's out of place for what they are communicating to you that the game is supposed to be like.
One thing I will say that actually works well, I think, about the shallowness, or the fact that this game really can't get in depth, is I'm going to be very curious to see how the fandom responds, because this is the prime game for insane fanon content, because it is giving you just enough. You have a character design, you have their key personality traits, and you have some hints at sort of like what they're like or how they interact with other characters. And I get the feeling, especially on places more like Tumblr or more like femme sort of centric like fandoms, like there's going to be a ton of shipping in between the various pieces of furniture. I expect people are going to start coming up with like headcanons of like, here's how I think this character would react to this, or here's how I think a full romance route with them would look like. And I think that's somewhere where this game could really take off if people latch onto this and they start creating a ton of fan art and fan fiction and cosplay and animations and things like that based off of these characters, because these are very, again, reminiscent of those sort of like humanizations people would make of things like countries or websites or video game consoles or things like that. And people would do the exact same thing. They would be like, what would the Nintendo Switch be like as a person? And then we're going to ship them with an Xbox or something like that. So it's too early to tell. This game hasn't been out for too long. It's only been out for about 2 weeks or so, but we'll see how this develops over time. And then the one thing I will say is, as of right now, this game is $30, which is a pretty steep price tag for a game like this, like one of these more niche games. It makes sense for the sheer amount of content, especially considering how many voice actors they had to hire, how much art they had to commission, and things like that. But that's like the only other thing that I think could potentially turn off some people, is it's a pretty big investment for a meme game, since that's kind of what it's advertising itself as, is like a meme game, and those are usually on the cheaper side. As far as like how much I've gotten out of it so far, I think it's going to be worth the $30 for me in the long run. I see myself very much slowly playing this game over the course of a couple of weeks. I think this is a game that's best enjoyed slowly. I don't think this is a game that's fun if it's binged. I do think the humor and some of the bits start to get a little grating if you've been at it for a couple of hours in a row. So this might be more of a game that you like log in, every other day and play a couple of routes and then come back to it and, see how much progress you can make and things like that. But again, this is definitely a love or a hate it game. I think you can tell by the time you've looked at the store page whether or not this is the game for you. If you liked things like Monster Prom, Hatoful Boyfriend, or kind of those other more lighthearted games, I would say especially Monster Prom. Monster Prom very much has a similar style of humor. I think you will like this game. But if you are someone who kind of finds parody games annoying, or who isn't really interested in a comedy game, if you don't really have any attachment to these voice actors, or you don't care much about this whole concept, you're probably going to hate this. So I think the nice thing about the game that is like this, that is so like niche and specific, is that it has its audience already. And I think they're going to be drawn to it. And I think the people who aren't into it are very clearly not going to even engage with this game at all.
Yeah, I have a hunch that what's going to happen is the person that buys the game does it because my favorite voice actor is in it and I want to go and play the character that they voice. And so rather than looking at it as a whole experience of a person who's just kind of wandering through and doing stuff, that people are going to be like, oh, Ben Starr is my favorite guy, or Ashley Birch is my favorite gal, They go, they find that character voiced by them, they play through all of the routes of that character maybe, and then they go, okay, is there anyone else that I care about? Which is pretty steep for, now you said it was $30, but that is 43 Australian. Gotta love that exchange rate. How's that going? And that's pretty steep for going and playing one character route. Like I see a lot of media where people are like, my favorite guy is in this, I have to go and check it out. But like the opportunity cost to watch a Netflix show or read a comic or, you know, seeing a movie because Ryan Reynolds is in it is a lot less hard to justify when, you know, you already have the game subscription, you already have to do the thing, you're not spending you wouldn't spend, you know, that kind of price ticket on that same singular experience for a thing, especially when there's so many other options in the same space that you weren't interested in. Like, rather than looking at it like, hey, I want to go and see this one guy, thinking about it like, how much of these things am I going to ignore that has been presented to me, makes it a lot different part of a sell. And I think that the price ticket just is entirely because they have to spend so much money on so many different voice actors to come in and work on this piece. So you really have to hope that all of those different voice actors have an audience of people that want to come and play the game. And so I don't know, maybe that's the main strategy. They're trying to tap into an audience that a lot of other games won't specifically be able to on that kind of scale. And they'll just see a lot of different fan bases come together. And because of that, you know, I'm excited to see if anything crazy happens on AO3. There's any crazy fan fiction? Is there any crazy shipping going on? Because if that kind of stuff doesn't happen organically, then the game might just die. Like, there might actually just be like a 24-hour news cycle kind of problem where people are like, cool, you know, this is an interesting concept and we're bored now because it didn't present enough for us to want to keep playing it. It didn't present enough for us to, you know, get excited and want to build our own stuff onto it.
All right. Well, I think that's pretty much it for Date Everything. It was a lot of fun to play. You can check out my streams as well. So if you're still a little 50-50 on the game, I have a couple of hours worth of it that go beyond the demo, so you can get a feel for what to expect. And I'm sure there's tons of streamers and YouTubers and whatnot who are playing this game. This is definitely a very streamable sort of game.
All right, Neko, hit us with the outro. Tell them what buttons to click.
Oh man, I've never done this before. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so that way you can get notifications by hitting that bell. It's because most of our videos probably get suppressed by the algorithm because we talk about naughty stuff. And you can also leave us comments. So tell us what object in your house would you fuck if they were a human or if they weren't a human? Or who is one of your favorite characters from Date Everything? If you've played it so far, what do you think about the game? Do you have other games that we should play? All of those things are really helpful for us. Not only do they boost engagement, but both of us get a little tickly feeling in our tummies when we get nice comments or recommendations for games. Those are also very, very helpful. And then otherwise, we're coming up on that 69th episode, so you better stay tuned. We got some big stuff planned. So lock in, and we're going to see you next time for the Sexy Business Podcast.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.